Good afternoon, everyone, on this lovely Friday. Hopefully, it is a lovely Friday for many of you. My name is Linda Wiley, and I am the director, hi, Austin, the director of online learning here at ACUHO-I, and I am excited to be bringing you this important topic, the first of several that we are going to be offering over the next 2 months on RAs and different roles of RAs, how we can support our RAs, CAs, however you use the term on your campus, and how we can continue to learn to utilize them as some of our best assets in campus housing. I have got a couple of slides that I am going to share with you about upcoming events for ACUHO-I. I will put those in the chat as well, where you can go and where you can register or learn more information. We have two webinars in the next couple of weeks. The first is on April 23rd. If you've ever wondered about publishing an article in an academic journal, but you've been a little nervous about doing so, then this is the session for you. It is describing the process of writing for and being published in the journal, and it is not as scary as you might think. And then on April the 28th, we have a panel that is going to be discussing the impact of loneliness on student well-being. And we will have a student that is the CEO of the Coalition for Student Wellbeing, a representative from Trellis Strategies talking about some of their recent survey information, and Marky from Active Minds, who's a partner with ACUHO-I, and talking about some of the Active Minds programs, as well as being facilitated by our faculty member that we love, Jason Lynch, who does a lot of work on mental health and trauma-informed care. So those are both coming up. If you miss a webinar, you can always go out to our YouTube channel and we post our webinars online so that you can go back and see what you missed. Next Wednesday is the Small College and University Symposium. There is still time to register. I will put that link in the chat. And that is an afternoon chock full of programs with our small college and university teams in mind. You can register as an individual or with a team pass. And last but certainly not least, we are headed to the land of the mouse. We're headed to Orlando for Campus Home Live in June. You won't want to miss it. Lots of sun, fun, great fellowship, and even better programs. So I will put the link for the Campus Home Live registration information in the chat as well. But today we're going to be talking about career readiness and RAs. And I'm so fortunate on behalf of ACUHO-I that we have two practitioners that are doing the work and different approaches to utilizing career readiness in RAs. So I'm excited to hear from both of them. So first we will have Grayson Blythe. And Grayson, she, her, and hers, is an assistant director for residential communities and housing at Denison University. She has spent her time professionally in recruitment, training, and development of student residence hall staff with a specialization in career readiness and professionalism for 6 years. She plans to continue to help residence life staff develop habits and structures which incorporate these specializations to revitalize and evolve their programs. After Grayson provides some information, then we're going to turn it over to Connor Dezor, he, him, and who is an assistant director for residence life at Tulane University with 9 years of experience in university housing and career services. With a passion for student leadership development, Connor connects his background in residence life and career services by focusing on student leader career readiness and post-graduation success. Connor believes that by relating current job skills to future career competencies, we can develop more engaged and better performing student leaders. So I'm very excited to hear from both Grayson and Connor. We're going to do a little switch of our PowerPoint. Hit, so you now should all be seeing a PowerPoint emphasizing career readiness and growth to recruit student staff. Thumbs up. All right, and with that, I am going to turn it over to Grayson.
All right, thank you. As was just announced, my name is Grayson Blythe, Assistant Director for Residential Community Housing at Denison University. Happy to be with you all today, and happy to talk about this really important topic that is near and dear to my heart. So happy to have you, and we'll get started. But my what I want to talk about today is emphasizing career readiness and growth to recruit student staff. Linda is controlling my slides, so there we go. Okay. So some topics I'm going to cover during my portion of the webinar today. Reasons to emphasize career readiness and growth when recruiting your student staff in your residence halls. Assessing what your program offers or can offer your candidates. Partnering with cross-campus offices. Working with current alumni and student staff. And then results at my university, Denison. So first and foremost, when looking at why this is an important topic, why this is something that my university and other universities are focusing on today, really looking at three areas. First being fighting for a spot in overloaded schedules. So today's student is really feeling an intense pressure to be able to secure employment or their next step post-graduation. Often what we are seeing is that this is leading students to seek out resume building experiences that can specifically speak to future employers while they are in college. So this looks like internships, apprenticeships, research opportunities, and more. This in turn can leave little to no time or desire for traditional college experiences like being an RA. They may have to say, I have this other experience that is better serves me professionally, and I don't have the time to be an RA. And so you may be losing out on students who don't see being an RA as necessarily a step for their career. So that is something that we are definitely seeing, and you may be seeing as well. Next, looking at intrinsic motivation beyond the free room or pay. It's okay if the free room or pay of the RA role gets students to apply, but it's an age-old challenge to get them to a place sometimes where that isn't their only motivation for doing the role. You may think, oh, they get to be a campus leader, that should be enough, or that should be really exciting. However, I have found in not only my role at Denison, but in previous roles as well, that this actually motivates very few students at times beyond the bare minimum of the role, being there, helping people. Those are all really great things, but when it comes to going above and beyond or really being dedicated, the call of being a campus leader may not be quite enough. Especially when you're really looking at that column on the left. Is being a campus leader worth their time at this point when they could be doing something else that gives them a leg up? And then finally in this area, looking at making expectations clear from the start. So this is more so, it helps you as the practitioner or as the supervisor. So this really goes beyond why this is important to students and getting students recruited, but it helps you in the long run. So job action conversations are hard, especially for younger professionals who may not have done it before, or maybe the students don't necessarily realize that what they have signed up for is a job in a lot of aspects. They may be getting it mixed up with club opportunities or organization opportunities on your campus. And so when you make expectations clear that this is something that is going to help you professionally and be ready in your career, that really helps set the bar for expectations that you're going to have in the role. And so when maybe things pop up later on in their time as a student staff member with you, you can fall back on that and that idea of, hey, this is a professional development opportunity. This is a job in a lot of ways. And we want to make sure that we're helping you develop in that sense rather than just being a campus leader. So when you're looking at trying to insert career readiness and skill development into your recruiting specifically for student staff, you really want to start by assessing what your program offers candidates, and then you can in turn turn that into your marketing. So thinking of networking opportunities, what who does being an RA give the student access to that they would not normally have access to? Maybe that's administration, other RAs, other students. Think about who being in this role you can connect those students with to better further their own career skill readiness. So some examples of how we have utilized that is department, division, or institution leadership. We are an institution that says CA, so forgive me if I mess up and say CA instead of RA, but we have them connected with folks at our institution that they may not be connected with, whether that be the president of our institution, the board of trustees, folks who are connected who they may not meet otherwise because they are in this position. Supervisors who they're consistently learning from. Not every college student gets somebody who works with them professionally very consistently while they are on a college campus before they really are treading into the world of career readiness or just careers in general. And so that may help them as well. Peers they may not normally get to know otherwise, so folks from other majors, other programs, and then alumni RAs who can talk about their job search experience and how they utilize the role. I'll talk a little bit more about utilizing your alumni RAs in a later slide. Also looking at marketable skills. So thinking about what RAs can list on their resume or their LinkedIn. I don't know about your institution, but LinkedIn is very popular at Denison. And so students are constantly adding us and updating their LinkedIns to make themselves more marketable. So communication, receiving and acting on feedback, crisis management, customer service, adaptability, things that we are not super surprised of or we know that that is something that our RAs will develop. We just have to help them be able to market it. So some examples would be hard skills versus soft skills, classic skills, so the things like crisis management, communication, or new skills, things around technology. Do you have them working with a management software? Hands-on experience. Not every student is getting that hands-on experience in a role in their undergrad. And then measurable development. Ideally, your RAs are coming out with things like evaluations or feedback conversations that they have been able to act on and they can speak to that experience. And then finally, badges, certificates, and micro-credentials. Do you have the ability to grant micro-credentials? Do you have a program like that at your institution? If not those, you can create badges of completion on most campus management softwares. Denison utilizes campus groups, and that allows us to create badges that can be then ported to LinkedIn. And so we have in the past couple years created a training badge for our student staff, and they are able to then port that over to LinkedIn to have that on their LinkedIn profile. If you can't use those, certificates are certainly making a comeback as well. Our students appreciate a really good certificate, even just a virtual one that they can post and talk about. So in a lot of ways, when we train our RAs, we can formally recognize those from our program. We have that ability to do so. Some examples of that being full training badge certificate, mental health first aid, safe zone training, etc. All of this and this whole slide would then ideally be making it into your marketing and the conversations that you are having with potential candidates. Next, looking at partnering with cross-campus offices. So how can you use other campuses to really tap into populations of students that you may not be getting traditionally in your applications to be an RA? I think one that is very obvious is career services. So these folks can help promote your RA role. They can offer mock interviews. They can provide an interview preparation session. We've been very fortunate to work with our career center here on Denison's campus, and they have been great about doing the mock interviews. They have a program where we can record ourselves. So my office has recorded ourselves as an interviewer, so students can practice interviewing with us. They can provide an interview. They have provided an interview preparation session. Sorry, for the last 3 years, and that's been very well attended. So not only is that beneficial to us because it gets more people in the room interested in our role, but it's also encouraging students to go to a career services session that they may not be going to otherwise because they are on the younger side. So our first years in particular really like that session to go and hear from our career services to get kind of pumped up. So that not only helps them, it helps our career services because it gets their name out there, and then it helps with our numbers of recruiting as well. Alumni engagement can also be big. So connecting with your alumni RAs if you're newer to your institution and maybe don't have a listserv of alumni RAs. They can connect you with those folks. They can highlight successful alumni who served as RAs in the past at your institution if they have social media or other such newsletters, things like that. And they can really get the RA job out there for you. And then they could even potentially host an RA alumni panel or get videos from your alumni RAs to really help with your marketing and explain why being an RA was so valuable to these alumni and how it helped them. And then some additional options, just if you're thinking, who else at your institution could support your recruitment, what offices do your RAs regularly work with? We have had different marketing events or promotional events, networking events, things like that with our campus safety offices, with our Office of Community Values and Student Conduct, even with our student employment office. I think that you can really think outside of the box and get more offices connected with your goals of recruitment and improving your recruitment with that kind of larger overarching goal of how can we show how this is helping career readiness and how are we reaching students who career readiness is very important to them. So then working with your current and alumni RAs for recruitment specifically. So this is something that I have found very worthwhile and very engaging both for our current RAs and our alumni RAs. So working with our current RAs, we host a networking session for candidates every year. This is kind of a low stakes networking session where they get to come and meet some of our current RAs, some of our professional staff, and also practice their networking, practice their elevator pitch or their self pitch. So they get that kind of instance of this is something that folks do out in the real world in the job market. They go to networking events and they pitch themselves. So that's a really great opportunity for our candidates and our current RAs as well to get that experience. They can highlight what they've learned and developed so far. They can promote the role in LinkedIn and social media. Those two bullets in particular make their way onto posters and Instagram posts where we're getting quotes from our current RAs saying, this is a direct skill that I have developed, and this is how this is helping me. Denison is very internship heavy. All of our students need to have an internship or two before they graduate. And so we're able to really hone in on how RAs are using their experiences and the skills that they are developing. So some of those skills I talked about earlier, like communication and crisis management, they're really able to talk about how they have talked about those not only in their resume and their cover letter, but also in interviews to secure internships. Working with our RAs, our current RAs, we are able to say, hey, as you interview and you find yourself talking about the RA role, can you let us know? Can you contact your supervisor or contact myself and let us know what you talked about and how that went? And then, how did that end up going for you? Did you secure the internship? And then finally, just being prepared to talk about their experience in a way that translates into career readiness. I think this is where you tap into your current RAs during your recruitment cycle and you say, hey, as you're having conversations and people are saying, well, why are you an RA? Why is it worth it? Anything like that. Talk about the traditional stuff, talk about the single room and talk about the pay, but also, really dive into the stuff that we've been working on, which is your career readiness. So having those conversations early with your RAs to say, hey, this is what I would love for you to talk about with your peers who have questions, not demanding or kind of dictating what they say, but working with them to develop responses where they can really talk about that. And then as far as your alumni RAs go, I think this is a really untapped group that not a lot of institutions use. Obviously, we have really great connections to our alumni RAs, but we aren't always quite talking to them about how did this job help you? How did this experience in undergrad help you do what you're doing now? So this was really inspired myself by a conversation I happened to be having with an RA who was with me 5 or so years ago, and she ended up getting a job working with an NBA team, and she really just kind of on her own volition talked about how she talked about being an RA in the interview, and when she received the job offer, the supervisor for the job said back to her, you know, you told me you were an RA in college and you talked about your experiences, so I knew that you really knew what you were doing, and that's why I hired you because I was an RA as well. And so it becomes kind of that idea of that's a really great story that I would love to tell, and I continue to tell that every year to my new RAs. But it is a really good experience that I would not have asked her for had she not just given that to me or talked to me about that of her own volition. And so now I'm much more intentional about that. So with that, and from there, I really got into getting stories of how they've developed career readiness skills that help them in the job hunt. So now I have a nice folder of a bunch of quotes from various RAs over the years, in all different aspects and all different career paths, from medicine to data analytics to even things like computer science, some of those newer or more in demand majors. Speaking about how they use the skills they developed in the role in their current employment, so we've been really fortunate at Denison to bring some folks back over the years to talk about, hey, like this is something that I learned on the job as an RA here, that got me to today, and we got to bring some alumni back for a recruitment session as well, and that was great. And then additionally, just anecdotes regarding training experience they had as an RA that professionally shaped them. You know, being able to share those on a poster or in your other marketing materials can be very valuable as well. And then finally, even potentially offering an alumni panel as part of your recruitment process. I think the students of today, at least in Denison, have responded really well to being face to face with somebody who can really share their experience. And not only are they excited to meet alumni, but also they're excited to meet somebody who's saying, hey, this thing that you are applying for, or you're intending to apply for, is really valuable, not only at the time that you're here in undergrad, but beyond that as well. It really, I think, flips a switch for a lot of our candidates who maybe were on the fence previously, and makes them say, I think this is a really worthwhile experience. So overall, would just love to share some results of the implemented changes here at Denison. So this process I really did develop at a previous institution, but when I brought it to Denison about 3 to 4 years ago, we saw an increase in attendance at the informal networking session, which was pre-application due date. So we went from 15 people to 200 in our first 3 years. So we are really seeing some great numbers there. We saw an increase in total applications. We went from 110 to 240 in the last 3 years for 65 total positions. So that's been really, really great. We have an increase in non-first year new applications. So we traditionally saw a lot of first year applicants, and that's great. Love to have them, but we also were missing a lot of folks who maybe did their first year here and then just got into a track of thinking, you know, that's not the job for me, or it's too late for me to apply, or I need to focus my time on elsewhere. So we were able to increase those applications. So from our sophomores and juniors in particular, we went from 56 applicants to 95 applicants in those first 3 years. We had an increase in current staff applications as well. So we went from 75% of eligible returners applying to 100%, which was also an amazing increase. And then finally, we just got new and varied responses to why do you want to be an RA? We were no longer getting just the classic, I want to help people, or I want to have a free room or a single room. We started getting answers more along lines of that career readiness, that we were putting out into the world. We were getting back things like, I want to develop this specific skill, or I want to go into medicine. And a big part of medicine is working with people and being an advocate for people. And I really need to learn more about that. And that's why I'm so interested in this role. And so that was kind of an unintentional side effect that we were really excited about as well. Okay, and I just have time for questions, but I also, if we're just going to do questions at the end, we'll happily pass over.
You know, let's do a mix. Let's do if you have any initial questions right now, let's put those in the chat or the Q&A, and then we will leave some time at the end for general questions or thoughts as well. Grayson, they would love your email. It is now in the chat, so thank you. Other questions, or if anybody wants to note in the chat or in the Q&A if you have had similar success or any type of, any kind of shift in your RA selection or recruitment process that would be in line with some of the things that Grayson outlined. Okay, well, keep thinking. You're going to have a chance at the end to add any additional questions, but at this point, Connor, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. So we should be looking at the first page of my slide. I think, I don't know, yeah, we're good. Okay, perfect. So hello, everyone. Again, my name's Connor Deisler, he, him pronouns. I am one of our assistant directors for residence life at Tulane University in New Orleans. And I'm going to be talking to y'all about a presentation that I gave last summer at Campus Home Live on a workshop model that I kind of developed here for our students on how to translate their RA experience to career readiness. We found that a lot of our RAs value the experience that they have with us, but then weren't necessarily talking about it in resumes or in interviews. And so kind of really missing an opportunity to sell themselves with the experiences that they get with us. And so I will spend some time talking with y'all about that. So first, we're going to cover a call to action that I have for everyone on working with student career readiness. We're going to talk about an issue that is currently present with our students about not talking about those skills with the employers that they're interviewing with. And then we're going to talk about how to address the issue. I'll give away that I have done through that competency-based workshop model that I have here. And then also a lot of resource sharing. So definitely making sure that y'all walk away with some tangible stuff that you can then take to your campus. Okay, so the call to action is our students' career readiness is our problem too. The career readiness is not just something for your campus career services office to kind of handle and work with students on. It is something that we are called to do in our work in housing and residence life as well. And so with this, ACUHO-I has a lot of different kind of foundational documents. The future of the profession talks about learning as an organization, which really kind of calls us to constantly be looking at ways we can improve our services for our students. How can we make our training and recruitment and selection processes even better for our RAs? Our core curriculum, looking at human resources and leadership, kind of compels us to analyze how are we recruiting and selecting and training staff. And part of that is how do we get them whenever they're done with us to then their next opportunity? How do we get them to develop those leadership skills? And then in our standards and ethical principles, talking about student learning and development and making sure that our students are also learning skills and learning different competencies as they spend time with us. So in short, student affairs educators must help students make meaning of their leadership experiences by connecting skills to employment competencies. So looking a little bit at the issue, NACE is the National Association for Colleges and Employers. It is the National Association for basically campus career services. And something that's really cool about their association is that it is both made up of career services professionals at college campuses, but then also industry leaders. And so it's a way for them to come together and talk about what are we seeing in the upcoming workforce in college campuses, and then what are industry leaders expecting from that workforce? How can we start developing skills in our students to then help them be successful later? So they define career readiness as a foundation from which to demonstrate requisite core competencies that broadly prepare the college educated for success in the workplace and lifelong career management. And they developed over the course of years working with employers, what kinds of skills employers are looking for. They kind of boiled it down to these 8 different competencies. And so looking at those, just a thought for your consideration to think of, which of these competencies do you think you actively work on with your students? So some of the ones that came to my mind when I first started looking at this was like, oh yeah, we totally talk about critical thinking when we do on-call training and that kind of stuff. Obviously, we talk about leadership because there's, student leaders on our campus and we do a lot of leadership development. We talk about teamwork all the time because they're working as part of staff teams and, with co-RAs on developing events. So those things came very quickly. But then I was like, well, what could we be focusing on more? Do we really talk about career and self-development? Do we really kind of explain how they use technology in the role that they do and how that could translate to using other technologies? And so I think those were things that I was really kind of looking at. How do we promote this with our students? So, something in kind of just doing some of research on getting to know what is the landscape of employment right now. Something that's come up is students are struggling to identify and communicate their competencies to employers. So, the two QR codes there, I encourage you to scan those. They kind of send you to some of the resources that I've been talking about today. I also just dropped all of the links that I'm going to be using in the chat for you. So, feel free to click on those as well. The first thing is every year, NACE does a student survey. So they survey graduating students on a lot of things, like their confidence in their skills, their confidence in being able to find a job after graduation, how many jobs are they applying for, all of those things. And so that gives us really good data on just our student bodies and how they are experiencing the job market. And then NACE also does a job outlook survey every year. So that is surveying employers' perspective on what are they seeing from the new workforce. What skills do they see coming in really good? And then what skills do they see lacking in the workforce? And so something from this most recent survey is that employers are stressing the importance of experiential learning, which is really good for us because that's kind of the work we do with our students. It is the experiential learning piece. And more than 40% of employers seek candidates with on-campus student work. Again, really great news for us. These are things employers are looking for, and we can market to our students. Hey, this is what your future employers are looking for. Talk about your RA role to them because that's what they want to hear about. Um, Almost 70% of respondents use skills-based hiring. And so what that means is in the surveying of employers, almost 70% of those employers use a strategy of skills-based hiring when doing their interview processes and then making hiring decisions. So students appear to be unfamiliar with the concept of skills-based hiring. So that's a problem that we need to start addressing in our field. We need to start working with students on preparing them how to talk about their skills to employers. So fewer than 40% of graduating seniors said they were familiar with the term skills-based hiring, but nearly 46% said that they were asked to demonstrate those skills in the hiring process. So something for consideration, how are we preparing our student leaders for skills-based hiring processes? Some things that I thought about are, how can we use a skills-based hiring process with our student leaders? Look at your hiring process for your RAs or student leaders on your campus. Are you incorporating skills and competency-based questions? If you do like a group process, are you having them practice and demonstrating skills? When it comes to interviewing, a lot of times employers want them to come prepared to share how their skills have helped them solve a problem, which is great. Can you have your returning RAs as part of their returner process discuss how their RA experiences help them solve a problem? You're giving them kind of a chance to practice what they eventually should be doing in their job searches whenever they graduate and go to their employment after they're with us. Can you have your student leaders submit their resume for feedback and specifically focus on the RE experience, emphasizing those professional skills? So how can we make sure that we are connecting not just coursework, but then also their experience as an RA, the co-curricular things to their resume? Is it showing up? Is it showing up in the right way? Those are all things that can be done to address these. So I'm going to be talking now about how I went about looking at trying to address this problem on our campus. The QR code there, also linked in the chat, is to a Google Drive where I put all of the resources that I've used in developing the workshops that I put on. So definitely feel free to be looking at those, going over the resources information shared there. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I developed the workshops, what they look like, and why I designed them the way I did. So I looked at the problem being our students don't have the language that the employers are using to talk about skills. So a lot of times we say, hey, as an RA, you're a student leader on campus, you're working on leadership. Hey, like while on call, you're using critical thinking. But a lot of times the RAs themselves aren't connecting those dots. They don't see being on call as critical thinking skills. They just see it as being on call. So if they're applying to a job that doesn't include an on-call or crisis response function, they're not talking about being on call, which is kind of a missed opportunity to talk about critical thinking skills. So how are we starting to connect those dots for the RAs? So the learning outcomes for all of the workshops is that they're going to learn these NACE competencies for career readiness because these competencies are the language that employers are using to talk about skills they're looking for. So how do we give them the language to talk about their own skills? They're going to define the specific competency of the workshop. So I developed a workshop specifically for each different competency. And so looking at deep diving for that, can they define the competency that we're talking about? They're going to then identify the skills, behaviors, and attitudes associated with that competency, and then be able to articulate how those skills, behaviors, and attitudes are associated with the RA role. So essentially, it's very much, can you understand what employers want, what you are doing that does that, and then can you talk about it the way that you need to be talking about it? And so just kind of the flow of the general workshop agenda was, going over the learning objectives, doing kind of an introduction. Before we got into anything, I had a pre-assessment that I had them do that kind of, we're going to look at a screenshot of it, but basically gauged before attending this workshop, how did you feel about these different things? Then I overview what NACE is, what the competencies are. We go into specifically that competency of defining it. We compare it to what RAs do. So of the skills of this competency, how do you as an RA do those skills? We then do an activity. I've designed an activity for each competency to really show them, hey, you use this competency in your role. Here's how we just did it. Then we do a post-assessment. It is the exact same questions, and I was able to then see, based on just the information covered in this workshop, did you show improvement and growth? And then at the end, always talking about those career prep resources and ways to continue on. So this is just screen grabs from the slides that I use with the workshops. So looking at defining the competency, it's very much, they come up kind of sequentially. So I just throw up on the screen, okay, we're talking about critical thinking. What comes to mind when you think of this competency? And then, of course, there's crickets for a little bit. And then people start raising their hands and they talk about, oh, critical thinking. It's, being able to problem solve, being able to analyze things from different perspectives, stuff like that. All of those are great. I then put up the definition of that competency that NACE uses. And I highlight that for them to show this is the language that employers use to talk about critical thinking. So while we may have lots of different ways to think of critical thinking and they're all correct, we need to make sure we're talking about it the way the employers are understanding it. And so being able to highlight that for them was really a key part of that part of the presentation. We then moved to, again, associating what are the skills of that competency with what you do as an RA. And so they kind of show up of, I throw up, make decisions and solve problems using sound, inclusive reasoning and judgment. How do you think you do that as an RA? They get to thinking a little bit, they throw out some examples, and then I show an example I thought of. So you do that when a resident comes to you with an issue they don't know how to solve. That is when you are applying that skill. So this part of the presentation is connecting the dots for them of how they use these skills in their RA capacity. On the left is that screen grab of the pre and then post assessment. It's the same questions. So it's trying to focus on three different things. One, based on your understanding of this competency, how confident do you feel discussing your skills within that competency to an employer? So just looking at your confidence and talking about it in an interview or job setting. Then it's, can you accurately select the definition of that competency? So do you actually know how employers define that competency? And then the last is a select all that apply, where they have to select what skills are associated with that competency. Again, some of these skills you're looking at and you're like, yeah, I could totally see how that's critical thinking. But that's not necessarily how the employers define critical thinking. They might be putting it under another competency. So again, being able to really gauge, are they using the language that's going to be important to them as they go into a job search? So the data in the other graphs is kind of what the pre and post assessments turned out to be. I did this workshop 3 different times. So I did a critical thinking workshop, I did a leadership workshop, and then a communication workshop. And so with those, for every single workshop, at the end of the workshop, the participants felt more confident in their ability to talk about that competency with an employer. So just by engaging in conversation about it, they started feeling more confident in their ability to talk about those things with an employer. They also were able to more correctly identify the definition of that competency, which was a big goal of the workshops. So loved seeing that data. The one at the bottom was definitely, I struggled with a way to visually articulate how that happened because it was a select all that apply. Sometimes they were selecting some of the right responses, but then included some wrong responses. So at the end, the gray area is selecting all of the correct responses and none of the incorrect responses. That is the gray. And so you can see for both critical thinking and leadership, the gray increased. So that was wonderful to see. They were more accurately identifying the right skills for that competency. Communication did not see that kind of same level of increase. And I think that that was because I delivered that presentation as part of a large group, like all 150 RAs at spring training at a moment where they're just not quite clued in and they're not really checked in. And so for that workshop, I did see a little bit more struggle with the assessments. And so I think that that kind of contributed to it, which was still helpful to know. So some lessons that I learned along the way is that students did not like an optional workshop type format that was held outside of or in addition to the required trainings and meeting times that they already have to do. So I at first thought I was going to do one workshop a month. It was going to be totally optional for RAs to go to if they wanted to. I held one of those workshops. No one showed up. Got some feedback from the RAs as to why, and realized they're so busy and their time is so precious. They already allocate time to the RA role with weekly staff meetings and coming for fall training and spring training. They did not want to have to allocate even more time to the position. So I then transitioned to how can I deliver this content in small chunks at a staff meeting, maybe, or at our spring training or at an in-service. And that was a lot better results from that. So adjusted the format to shorter sessions. Something that is really important is getting your department leadership on board early. So the kind of initial concepts of this, and I was starting to kind of plan it out. I ran it by my director, and she was very supportive of the idea and how can we get this information to the RAs and get them talking about it. So as you all know, training schedules, you're competing for time with a lot of people. And so the fact that I had department leadership on board meant that I was able to get a part of spring training time dedicated to this topic, which is a very challenging thing to get sometimes. And so I think that that was really helpful for me. And then just make sure you're hitting your points quickly and clearly for an audience with mixed interest and investment. Some of the RAs, if you're doing it as part of a required training, some of them just aren't going to be interested in it. They may already have their job lined up after graduation. They may already know all of this information. So they're going to be a little checked out. So how can you keep the information going quickly, keep it relevant, keep it engaging, so that way you're not having parts of the audience kind of checking out, which then kind of branches out to the rest of the group. So again, scanning for resources. That was kind of everything I have. Love to have the rest of the time to answer questions, talk about any of the resources that I shared. I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen.
Thank you so much, Connor. As you think about your questions, your thoughts, things that you want to share or ask Grayson or Connor, be sure to either put that in the Q&A or directly in the chat. I think some takeaways I had, I think well, there are lots, but um, one thing that just now stood out was the thread of communication and the skill building. Because I think, Grayson, you talked about, the ability to communicate, have access to people on campus and then have access to alumni, on the front end. But then, Connor, as you look at competencies, how have you taken that experience and you can really demonstrate the skill building in that? And so that was just one of the ways that there's a thread, I think, of this is what you can gain and why this is a really great experience, to this is how we've made it a great experience, and what you then can leave with to not only make you, I think, a better employee all the way around, but you can articulate the very specific skills.
Yeah, Grayson, I loved how you included alumni a lot because I was
Mhm.
thinking like, yeah, I share this data with our students to say like, look, we have these surveys from these national organizations and like, here's the proof. But I think it doesn't always land or hit. Whereas like if you have people that actually did that job and then they can
Mhm.
say, hey, I use this competency every day of my work and you do too as an RA.
Mhm.
Like it's getting the same point across, but I think it hits a lot better.
Mhm. All right, Connor, we do have one question about was there any pushback on the idea? Because it sounds like that you had, and Grace, and I'll extend this question to you as well, as you were bringing some of the things to Denison. Some folks on board, was there any pushback? And if so, how did you navigate?
Yeah, I think pushback is definitely the right term. It wasn't, I never got any kind of just like, no, we can't do that. No, we don't have the time for it, right? Like, I think in general, our leadership is very supportive of how do we get our RAs getting the most out of the experience. I think pushback, I was challenged to focus on how am I delivering the message, in what ways am I packaging it that make the most sense for the RAs? How do I connect it back to what to what our department is already doing? And so potentially like connecting it to your department's mission or core values or something like that kind of furthers that argument of, hey, this is something that our institution or our department says is important. So why aren't we talking about it more? Why don't we do this more? And so I definitely think being able to go to your department with the alignment piece of how does this idea and this concept align with what we're already doing, and then being able to just come with some data. I think being able to come with the survey kind of results from these national organizations that are very, well recognized and accredited to show, hey, this is the landscape that we're in right now. This is something we can do to really support our students. I think we should do it. That tends to go over a lot better than just kind of coming with an idea without having something to back it up with.
For me, I originally presented something around this a few years ago at the Ohio affiliate of ACPA, and I titled the presentation "Leader is a Four-Letter Word," because I came in saying that our RAs were not campus leaders in the traditional sense, and I kind of came out swinging like that. I was a bit younger, but I face kind of the same thing in the sense of why are we shifting to this? I think there are folks who didn't see the value, or they almost thought it was cheapening the experience of what residence life is. And I think that it doesn't have to be like that. I think that it is just meeting today's students where they are, and understanding that they are not the students that we had when I was an undergrad, or when, 15, 20, 30 years ago. These are very different students with very different needs in undergrad. And, we all know enrollment and things like that. And so when you're looking at today's student, that was really my approach with folks who push back on it. And helping them understand why we did that. Similar to Connor, some of the stuff that you had done, or you have done at your institution. We also have implemented some different things into training, and it's the same kind of thing, having to justify why am I taking out things that we've always done, because those seem really experience or those seem really important to the campus leadership experience, and why am I replacing them with things like resume review, or bringing in our campus folks who work with job prospects and things like that. I really had to justify quite a bit of it to and help people understand that is today's student, and that's what they need.
Yep, Connor, thank you for putting that in the chat. A couple of questions that I have, and I realize that you have a small N. So some of this is what you're seeing, but also what you're hearing from your colleagues, in both your states and your regions, and then even nationally. Are you seeing this approach be a gateway for students to continue in the field of campus housing? That's my first question. I'm going to stop with that.
At my institution in particular, we don't have a school of education. We don't see a lot of our RAs interested in going into education just because that's not what they're coming to Tulane for. And so, as far as continuing in the field and the profession, not necessarily at Tulane, but whenever I gave this presentation last summer at Campus Home Live, the people that were in the session definitely talked about being able to show the benefit of this work, like becoming a resident director, going into housing isn't just like, oh, I get to stay at college and keep being a professional RA. Like, no, you're developing real skills and then you can use it with real employment, just like we do here. And so it definitely shows the value of the profession, I think, a lot more whenever you connect what our students do to like tangible skills that are very valued by employers.
For the first time in my career this year, had three people decide to go into residence life. So I don't know. I can't say that it was specifically about that. But I do think that when they were talking about deciding to go into it, they did specifically talk a lot about some of the things we had trained them on. Um, and I think mixing career readiness that they would be getting from a career services office with the work that we were doing, it did, kind of to echo Connor, it really showed this is a viable career. And this is something that takes a lot of skill and dedication. And so I think for the first time, like we are a small institution, we're 2,400 students. We don't have any graduate school affiliations, anything like that. And so I just think our students never really connected those. But I do like to think that kind of mixing those two worlds really did tell them like this is an actual career out there, and maybe that did influence those three, and at least I can hope so.
So another question I have, and then I'll encourage those of you all that are still with us. Any last minute thoughts or questions, please put those in the chat. Um, full disclosure, I have a college freshman, and so she's looking at the process. Currently, trying to find an internship, and that is I think becoming a little bit more difficult for students across the board. Have you found, and again, I know your N is small, but that students have been able to take the RA experience and really either utilize it in their formal education program or really sell this as, not only am I gaining these skills, I mean, I am doing on the job training that really replicates some of what full-time professional staff do. And this should definitely count as a similar type of experience.
That's what I've really sold a lot of my students on, and I'm happy to say that they have done so. So, as I mentioned earlier, Denison is very internship heavy. It is
Mhm.
required for almost all majors here. We don't do pre-professional programs, so they do those kind of internships instead of field work. So even just this year, having a student, I had a current junior mentoring a current sophomore who was talking about they're in a similar major, talking about getting an internship, and the junior was able to say, my internship last year I got, they told me that I got it because I was able to show them emails that I had sent to my residents, and they were impressed with, because it is in a way mass communication. Some of our CAs have, upwards of 50 residents, which I know does not sound a lot to everybody, but they were able to talk about their ability to mass communicate, and they had a physical example from the CA role that their competitors didn't really have for that role, and so I think that kind of at least the way that my staff is seeing it, is anything that gives them that leg up to say, I'm not telling you the theoretical, I'm telling you this is what I have done. It really is benefiting them in that sphere, and it is making them much more valuable to some of these internships that are almost more competitive than actual jobs.
Definitely echoing that. A lot of employers are starting to say in these surveys that people who come in with portfolios of work and have tangible examples of the skills that they are demonstrating definitely have a leg up. And so, whenever you can include that in the RA experience where they can actually work on tangible things, that's definitely beneficial. I had not thought before about like marketing the RA experience as an internship experience. And so that's like something really interesting to think about. But I do know whenever I was working in career services and doing career fairs, talking with recruiters, they would always say of campus jobs, if they see someone who has resident advisor on the resume, that immediately bump them up the list because the recruiters know on a college campus, an RA is a very common and consistent type of experience.
Mhm.
And if you have it, they know that you're getting these skills. And so becoming an RA is already kind of giving you that leg up. And then if you can start connecting RA stuff with the skills they're looking for, that's just even better. So definitely, it is a hard job market right now. And so being able to connect those dots for the students is definitely important.
Definitely. All right, before I turn it over to the two of you to bring us home with any closing remarks or thoughts, one last chance. I don't see anything in the Q&A or the chat other than thank yous, which I echo as well. So thank of you, both of you, for being here. So any last thoughts before we close out our webinar? Again, the recording will be sent directly to everyone that registered, but it will also be on our YouTube channel. I encourage you, as you have Friday afternoons and you need a brain break, go back and watch some of our webinars. We've generated some really good content this winter and spring, and it's all for you. So, Connor, any last thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to kind of talk on this. I think my last thought is just for your campus, no matter how big or small of a change you want to make, or even not a change, you're just going to fold this language of skill development and competency into what you're already doing. Just do something that helps connect the experiences your students are already getting to what they're going to do after college. It's going to be helpful for them, and it's going to make your position even more worthwhile.
Thank you. Grayson, any last thoughts?
Really just the same. I think this is a really valuable change that puts our profession into the 21st century. I think that it really shows that we want our students to succeed. We want today's students to succeed. And so happy to chat more. I don't think my messages are going to everybody. For some reason, mine are just going to the host and panelists. So if you missed it, my email address is Blythe, BLYTHEG @denison.edu. Happy to chat more.
BLYTHEG at DENISON dot
Correct.
edu. And Connor, I'm going to copy yours as well. I may be the only one that can do that. Here we go. Well, thank you both not only for sharing your time and your expertise, but being willing to share your direct contact information. This was great, a great way to spend some time on this Friday afternoon. And to everyone, hope to see you at another ACUHO-I event soon. Have a great rest of the semester. And those of you that are getting ready to start move out, good luck with that. May the force be with you. We hope that all goes well. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.